Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on Plane of Spiders, playing as the Forces of Chaos against the Empire. And this time around I did decide, having seen some comments, you guys were recommending that I try Chaos Knights with Lances, because I kind of bash them. I've never been too much of a fan of them, I suppose. But I figured, you know what, why not? Against Empire, we'll actually try to take the cav game from them. So what I did for this comp is, as you can see, the infantry core here is nothing special. 4 units of Chaos Marauders. These guys will trade okay with state troops. They can soak up missile fire. And essentially they're just there to buy me some time. They are backed by 2 units of Chaos Warriors with great weapons to help crack great swords a little bit. They obviously won't win in a 1v1, but they can still dish out some hurt to cavalry, and of course they will do some damage to great swords, even if they might lose in the long run. For my lord, I decided to bring Sarthorel. Of course, he has a lot of benefits. He's nearly invulnerable to missile pressure, especially magic missiles. For example, the Hammer of Witches, not the rarest sight in this matchup. He's basically invulnerable to its projectiles, so that's really nifty. And of course, otherwise, he is unbreakable, and he does have the Lore of Metal, which is a pretty respectable lore. He does also cause fear and terror. I only brought 2 cheap spells here. I brought the Searing Doom to bombard squishy backline troops, most notably handguns, Sterling's Revenge, that sort of stuff, as well as Plague of Rust. And this is how I really intend to win the cav fight, hopefully, is use Plague of Rust to debuff my opponent's Demigryph make them much weaker, and then open them up to getting hammered by my Chaos Knights with Lances. Especially on the charge, with that Monstrous 80 charge bonus, they should be able to Shrek Demigryphs with the help of a minus 60 armor from an Overcast Plague of Rust. Of course, we do have Arcane Conduit as well as Standard Die, just to make ourselves even a little tankier with the Everwatcher. Out on the other flank, just in case the Chaos Knights are not enough to win the cav fight, we do have a Chaos Warhounds with Poison as well as Summoners of Rage. Of course, Summoners of Rage still a very respectable anti-large unit. They've got great AP weapon stats, they've got a solid bonus versus large, and they also do have decent melee defense, so they can endure fairly well in combat. And of course, they do have that free cast of Chain Lightning, which sometimes is useful. Marauder Horsemen, as well as Marauder Horsemen as throwing axes, do make up a small little skirmish contingent just to zone off Pistoliers or do some additional damage to units like Demigryph Knights, harass backlines, that sort of stuff. And on the other flank, as we mentioned before, we've got 2 Chaos Knights with Lances, as well as the Chaos Warhounds with Poison. So hopefully between Sarthorel's debuffs, the poison effects from the Chaos Warhounds, and then the raw shock damage of the Chaos Knights, we should be able to win a cavalry duel. For my opponent's build, he did decide to go very infantry heavy. He's got a bit of a gun box here. He does have 2 handguns as well as a Witch Hunter with Accusation, making up the core center of his army. On either flank, you can see he's got 4 greatswords. In the front, he's got some spears to soak up the charge. 4 more spears making up the peripheral units of his army, and making sure that I basically will have a very hard time getting into his backline, even if with hounds, for example, who are pretty quick on their feet. It's going to be a little difficult. And finally, General of the Empire. So this has come at the cost of a very, very cheap front line, or general. Normally you'll see someone like Boris, or you'll see someone like Volkmar or Karl, and the general is incredibly cheap, especially like this on foot. He's not going to be spectacular. He's not really going to be winning any fights or any beauty contests. He does have Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, and Hold the Line, but that is really it. And that has definitely been a bit of a sacrifice to get such a wide list. Out on the flank, 2 units of Demigryph Knights with Halberds, as well as a Jade Wizard with the Power Stone, Earthblood, Regrowth, and Life Bloom. So very solid selection of spells. Definitely will make these Demigryphs a tough nut to crack. Regardless, you can see the lines closing pretty quickly. I was not too concerned with bogging these guys down. What I probably should have done here is pulled back a little bit with my main line, tried to distract my opponent, but I did not. You can see Sarthorel here being a bit of a nuisance. I'm going to pile in. He juked those spears a little bit there, but then kind of lose track because I was too focused over here on this engagement. And you can see here, the Demigryph Knights immediately take a monstrous volley from these Marauder throwing axes, from these Marauder horsemen, and then before my opponent is able to really get a nice escape there, we are going to hit them from the flank with those Chaos Knights with Lances. You can see with the space of just a few seconds, these Demigryph Knights here caught out or completely dumpstered. They're basically gone as a unit, just completely annihilated, and they're just going to fall apart really, really quickly. My opponent at this point, kind of desperate, is going to swing his Demigryphs around. The problem is my opponent's micro is largely focused over here. You can see his posturing his spears, trying to protect his flanks, making sure he's getting his charges off on my Chaos Marauders. But because of that, this flank over here completely dumpstered. These Demigryph Knights with Halberds are not making a comeback. They're getting completely destroyed and forced to rout. The Jade Wizard finally noticed my opponent's going to start running for dear life with him. He does cast an Earthblood here, trying to keep these guys in the fray, but really too little too late. So Sarthorel dives in, pops Stand or Die, and despite the fact that these guys do have 125 armor, the simple fact is there's 2 Chaos Knights here. There are Poison Warhounds debuffing them, making their melee attack much weaker, and they are occasionally being poked a little by these Marauder Horsemen. They've already taken some damage there, and they're going to be forced off incredibly quickly, which means that already the balance of power is being shifted in my favor, despite the fact that this frontline engagement is going pretty horribly. Now certainly the Chaos Warriors, the Great Weapons, have done some damage. These guys do have a respectable charge bonus of 26, actually much better than Great Swords, and pretty respectable for infantry in general, but better than most infantry. But they are of course going to lose. My opponent did have a much heavier investment in the front line. All those Great Swords, even without the spears included, are just very, very tanky. Over here, the Summoners of Rage are getting a little overextended, getting into those spears, so definitely a little bit of a mismicro there. But immediately we are going to drop another Plague of Rust on these Great Swords and make them, once again, much softer targets for our Chaos Knights. You can see those guys are diving in. And Plague of Rust, it does last a pretty long time. I do believe it's like 40 seconds or something. We quickly gloss over the effects here. Plague of Rust, it doesn't actually tell me what it does, but if we look at Sir Thorel, maybe, yeah, we can check after the battle. Regardless, these Great Swords are going to get terror routed, thanks to Sir Thorel, and my opponent is going to be forced off, despite the Earthblood going down here, trying to heal this center pocket. Elsewhere, you can see the Great Swords, they have won. There's definitely no debating that. The handguns are now going to be able to start pivoting, they're going to be able to start firing, they are definitely whittling down my Summoners of Rage, they've definitely done some damage to my Knights. So despite the fact that we're whittling down these Great Swords, you can see the throwing axes just pouring in there, racking up the damage. My opponent definitely still has quite a sizable pocket of troops. What we do here is we get immediate rear charge with our Hounds, backed up by Sir Thorel, which is going to allow us to rout these handgunners for good. And the nice thing, and something you should always try to do, if you can rout units and you haven't committed your light cav yet, or light harassment units, pull these harassing units clear, which is what I'm doing here with these Hounds, and let the infantry rout. These handguns are going to flee from their main formation. If my opponent doesn't escort them with infantry, I'm going to be able to opportunistically pick them off with these Warhounds, which is just great. Elsewhere, Sir Thorel does drop another Searing Doom, and we've really been dropping these around the clock, but unfortunately I've been kind of missing them. But Sir Thorel has really just been bombarding the hell out of these guys. These handguns are now in full rout as well. They're down to 41 models, and they're just fleeing for dear life. Switch Hunter over here, he's racked up 5 kills, but really nothing too spectacular. He did drop an accusation on Sir Thorel, but Sir Thorel kind of shrugged it off. He does have 6,000 HP, he's definitely very tanky, and he's able to kind of sit here and get beaten in the face. But definitely this is not what I should have been doing. The spears, although Sir Thorel is fairly squishy, although the spears are not particularly great, this Sir Thorel is pretty squishy, so he's going to suffer here pretty badly, and it's definitely showing. Now, I was making quite an effort to snipe the Jade Wizard, but I hadn't really brought the tools for that purpose, so we are going to be forced off once again. These spears are absolutely brutal unit against the Summoners of Rage. What I do here is I do bait these spearmen. You can see my opponent's army at this point has been just dissected into these little miniature clumps where I can take advantage of my great cavalry superiority to divide and conquer. You can see here a Searing Doom just pouring down these spearmen. They are very lightly armored. They're going to take an absolute beating, and it's followed up by a chain lightning almost immediately from the Summoners of Rage, and that is really going to just put these guys down. You can see it's immediately going to start wandering off into these spears. Now certainly it's probably going to do some friendly fire here. The 2 are Marauders, but honestly it doesn't matter. Marauders are so beaten up. Who really cares? Spears are going to start terror routing. You can see over here we are forcing out these handguns for good, so now my opponent is without that shooting contingent. He really doesn't have the control. And over here, seeing my opponent's Great Swords were fleeing, we are going to commit our Hounds into him. Now certainly normally if my opponent was more wary, this would not be a good idea, but because we get the full charge, my opponent did not get the charge, these Great Swords are actually going to buckle and rout before they're able to rally. And you can see we are going to force this unit of Great Swords off. Definitely a very valuable pick there. While on the flank, by pulling our infantry back, our infantry rallied because my opponent was forced to recommit resources to deal with this heavy cav presence. Because of that, we're going to be able to mop up these units of Great Swords. We're going to be able, you can see even a pretty healthy unit of Great Swords. These guys still have 50 models, or almost 50 models. If my opponent had the heals, these guys could definitely be a potent presence. But as it is, we're going to be able to force them off and then hound them to death, no pun intended, with our Warhounds over here. Now the Chaos Knights here are trying to pick at the Witch Hunter, but kind of failing. He's doing surprisingly well. He's kind of chipping away at them, doing quite a bit of work. Unfortunately, definitely not what we want him doing. But we are trying to sort of run him down and pin him here in place. Elsewhere, you can see the Marauder Horsemen picking at my opponent's force, and rather than allowing my opponent to sort of bog me down, we are basically dividing his army into bits, and then chasing those bits off the field. With Sir Thorel's Fear and Terror being applied, it's just a huge boon, and it means we can really isolate these troops. So these spearmen over here are going to get picked off, they're never going to come back. These spearmen over here, and these are, oftentimes, with these sorts of units, if they come back, and my opponent does still have a Lore of Life, we could be in a very bad position, but because we're just constantly picking these units off, my opponent is going to be whittled down. Here, the last 2 Great Swords, you can see down to 38 models. They've got over 100 kills, but we are going to be able to sort of get another meaty charge in there. We're going to be able to really disrupt them, and they're just finally going to fall apart. So you can see here these Marauder Horsemen just jabbing at them, running them down. They're being overrun by the Barbaric Hordes, and the Great Swords just really don't stand a chance. So with that, my opponent's army is essentially reduced to just a tiny little pocket here. Even the Witch Hunter, even poor Saltspire here, isn't full retreat. He's actually going to shatter onto the onslaught from the Chaos Knights. I don't understand what that animation is supposed to do. Why are they swinging their lances? What is with you guys? I think Chaos Knights are one of the most awesome units, aesthetically speaking. I actually don't really like the Swords of Chaos because they don't have the cool helmets and anything. But I think Chaos Knights are aesthetically so slick, but swing those spears around. What are you doing? Lances? I don't know if it's supposed to be a lance, I suppose. Kind of looks like a halberd a little bit. I don't know. But either way, they're swinging around like a sword. It's kind of odd. Regardless, these spearmen are going to start routing. You can see we hit the General Empire with a Plague of Rust, making him much more vulnerable to both our knights as well as our marauders. At this point, he's alone, essentially. The spearmen are routed, and my opponent's army is going to suffer army losses. So, a pretty decisive, even despite saying Pyrrhic victory there, I felt that it was a pretty secure win for the Force of Chaos. Certainly, it gave me some newfound respect for the Chaos Knights with lances. Combined with a debuff from Sir Thoril, we were able to really nuke down those demigryphs incredibly quickly. You can see they only got, between the two, the demigryphs only got 22 kills. Certainly my opponent missed micro a little bit. He let one of the demigryphs get overextended. He didn't get a charge off with the first unit demigryphs, so a few mistakes were made, but the Chaos Knights were just really able to apply the pressure, just melt that initial unit of demigryph knights, and snowball it into a complete wipe. That came at almost no cost to me, especially once Sir Thoril dived in with his buffs. For the rest of the army, the Marauders, they did okay. The Chaos Warriors did very well, all things considered, given they kind of got thrown into an atrocious position repeatedly. They still managed to do rather well. The Chaos Knights both getting a chevron, or 2 chevrons. They definitely racked up a lot of kills. They were able to, whenever I hit the enemies with debuffs, we were definitely getting a lot of value. One of the big problems I do find, though, with the Plague of Rust is that it's a single target, and it's got a pretty long cooldown, it felt like. I was able to get 2 Searing Dooms off in the time that I was waiting for the spell to cool down, which is a little unfortunate. It's definitely a bit of a lengthy cooldown, which I don't really like. I feel that for a single target spell that's fairly cheap, it should be more spammable, but unfortunately it is not. Marauder Horsemen also doing a great job, and that's also something. 52 and 66 kills. Most of these racked up against greatswords because that's the units, well, at least from the throwing axes, that's what I was focused on. You can see they actually gained a chevron in the course of that battle. Never underestimate Marauder Horsemen. They are a very potent force. If you're playing against Chaos, make sure to try to pick them off. You can see also the amount of damage done by the Warhounds was pretty crazy, and the Summoners of Rage. They kind of farmed those fleeing units and did a great job shutting them down. For my opponent's position, I think you need to play with more discipline. My opponent had the frontline superiority. He had the advantage of handguns, where my range, he could have zoned it off with the handgun fire, to be quite honest. There was zero reason to commit his demigryph halberds trying to pursue light cavalry and waste them in such a manner. Had he simply engaged my front line, I would have been forced to pull my cavalry into the front line just to preserve it, because I had absolutely no chance of winning with the force I had brought. I had no chance of winning the front line fight against 4 units of greatswords backed by a general, and a witch hunter, and spears, and handguns. There was no chance. You don't have snowball's chance in hell in that chase situation. So really, I think my opponent should have held back, gotten his infantry into the fight, started winning that infantry fight, forced me to make a move, and then flexed in with his demigryphs. A combined charge from the demigryphs into the flank of my Chaos Knights with lances could have been devastating, or countercharging the Summoners of Rage, or countercharging the Chaos Warhounds, any of those units. It could have been huge. And my opponent didn't do that. He got a little overextended there. But nonetheless, good game to Wizardman here. I do hope you guys found it entertaining. Definitely, I like the Chaos Knights with lances. Might have to try them a little more often. But regardless, good game. If I did want to hop out real quick and check in customs what the exact duration was, because I did say in the match that I wanted to check that, what the exact duration is on Plague of Rust, because it's pretty lengthy. It's one of the nice things about it. You can see 44 seconds, so that's pretty solid. Basically, it means that you as long as you're committed to a fight with decent units, you're gonna be able. It's basically gonna last as long as you need it to. You're gonna be able to win, and it's a pretty cheap spell. At 6 winds of magic, it drops those demigryph knights from 125 armor to 65, which is a pretty huge impact. Given that it reduces their normally demigryphs, if the way armor works, demigryphs are getting a 90% damage mitigation on average, roughly, to non-AP damage initially, at least until they're exhausted. With this, they're only getting a 45% damage mitigation, which is a huge difference. That it basically you're halving their armor, and that does mean that your Chaos Knights with lances, who have such a high non-AP component to their damage. If we look real quick, their weapon strength is 31 and 15. 15 is actually higher than I think most non-AP cav. I could be wrong. But that does mean that rather than normally if you're losing 27 essentially of that damage, and plus of course that most of the charge is also being converted to non-AP as well, which is important to keep in mind. So it's just a huge buff in general. I actually do want to see just how well these guys stack up against, say, Dragon Princes. Dragon Prince's weapon strength is 44, but it's only 12 AP, so despite only having 2 less, there's definitely a tangible disadvantage there for Bretonnian Grail Knights, who, of course, do have the benefit of bonus Rich Large. They've only got... Oh, they've also got 15, so... that does definitely play a tangible role, though, I think, in making the Chaos Knights a little better. I'm pretty sure Blood Knights are like AP, and actually, yeah, Blood Knights also not the most amazing AP values. So definitely the Chaos Knights are reasonable in that aspect as far as non-AP cavalry goes. Regardless, I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and perhaps a little informative. If you did, like I usually say, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below just to keep up with additional content. I do try to put up new stuff daily. If you have any comments, any criticism, don't hesitate to post. I'll respond as soon as I can. With that out of the way, I do thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.